You're drafting the wrong wide receivers again, and if you keep ignoring the signs, your season is going to tank before it even starts. Every year, certain wide receivers get overdrafted, inflated ADPs, big names, but empty production. And every year, fantasy managers fall for the trap. In today's video, I'm breaking down the 3 wide receivers you need to avoid in your draft, but more importantly, the 3 wide receivers you should be taking instead. Same position, similar ADP, but completely different results. And let's start with a couple of aging wide receivers, each going in the 3rd round. In 2023, the first wide receiver ran a vertical route on about 47% of his routes. And on those routes, he posted the 3rd best separation score of any receiver, the best yards per route run of any receiver, and the 3rd best targets per route run. Now fast forward to last year. He ran a vertical route on about 50% of his routes, but his separation score, that dropped all the way down to 33rd among wide receivers. His yards per route run, that dropped down to 50th among wide receiver, and his targets per route run dropped to 33rd. Now he's coming off a season where he didn't even reach 1,000 receiving yards and only had 81 receptions and 6 touchdowns. Not to mention, he's openly complained about his situation with this current team. So what happens if the team struggles to start? If he's not getting the ball? If he's not being productive? Does he just pout like he kind of did last year? Oh, and let's not also forget, he's now entering his age 31 season. Wide receivers don't just get better as they get older, they get worse. And it looked like last year he definitely got worse, and I don't see how that's going to change in 2025. Yet he's actually being drafted ahead of this wide receiver who just finished 9th among all wide receivers in points per game. He did this despite playing in one of the worst offenses in the NFL with one of the worst quarterbacks. And unlike the first wide receiver who is tasked with running vertical routes on the outside against tough corners, he got to move into the slot. He played almost half his reps in the slot last year, which gives him more favorable matchups and is really what should happen to wide receivers as their career starts to wind down. Last year, he ranked 9th in targets, but only 75th in catchable target rate. While his targets should remain fairly consistent from last year, the catchable target rate should go way up because he's getting a major quarterback upgrade, not to mention a major offensive scheme upgrade. And he's also still a fantastic red zone threat. He had 11 touchdowns last year and finished 3rd among all wide receivers in red zone targets. So please help me understand. Why are you drafting Tyreek Hill in the 3rd round over Davante Adams? Sure, Davante Adams is no longer the elite alpha wide receiver 1 he was in years past, but neither is Tyreek Hill. And Davante Adams has a much better role in the Rams offense, taking over that slot role from Cooper Kupp, than Tyreek Hill does when they're going to ask him to run a bunch of vertical routes where he can't win those routes anymore. Not to mention, I have doubts if his quarterback can throw those vertical routes well enough. So I am passing on Tyreek Hill in the 3rd round, and I am drafting Davante Adams instead. All right, now let's talk about 2 wide receivers who kind of seem overvalued every single year, but this year I think one isn't. Starting with wide receiver A, who has yet to even average 15 PPR points per game over each of the last 4 seasons. He's only even topped 1,000 receiving yards in half of his seasons, and he's only even reached 90 receptions once in his entire career. And he's done this with pretty good quarterback play. Now he goes to a team with arguably the worst quarterbacks in the entire NFL and an offensive coordinator you don't want in fantasy football. Yet he's still being drafted as a decent wide receiver 2 type in fantasy and over the other wide receiver who just last year had over 1,000 receiving yards despite playing with some of the worst quarterbacks and being in one of the worst offenses. And last year, this wide receiver ranked 18th in targets and 3rd in deep targets, but had the most unrealized air yards, over 1,000 unrealized air yards, and ranked 97th in catchable target rate. That is how bad his quarterbacks were. But now he gets a massive quarterback upgrade this year, which means those targets are now going to be catchable at a higher rate. He's going to connect on more of those deep balls, and the offense should now give him more opportunities to score touchdowns. And despite his team needing pass catchers, they really didn't bring in any pass catchers that scare me off of Calvin Ridley. I think Calvin Ridley is going to have a monster year this year. I think he's going to be significantly better than DK Metcalf this year. I've said multiple times I think Calvin Ridley can be this year's Terry McLaurin, a veteran wide receiver who has left meat on the bone for multiple years based on bad quarterback play. That is going to change in 2025, and I think Calvin Ridley is going to finally realize the upside that he hasn't had the last few years. Yet for some reason, DK Metcalf goes before Calvin Ridley in every single fantasy draft this year. Don't make that mistake. Pass on DK Metcalf. Take Calvin Ridley instead. I love Ridley's upside with Cam Ward in this offense this year. I think he's going to have a breakout season. And hey, I know this is a football channel, but the NBA Finals start this week, and if you want to take advantage of it and get some action in the finals, you got to check Underdog Fantasy and their extender. With the extender, you can play your way to increasingly bigger boosts each game of the finals. Start the finals by using your Game 1 boost and continue boosting each subsequent game to unlock the next one. The longer the series goes, the bigger the boost. You're going to want to see how serious it gets when that Game 7 hits. Hop on Underdog, the best place to make picks during playoff basketball, and get started right now. And when you do, make sure you sign up using promo code ENDGAME, because that'll get you a free pick that you can use on that Game 1 boost, and not to mention up to $1,000 of bonus cash. Then finally, let's talk about a couple of rookies. Rookie A landed in a spot where I don't really know what his role is going to be. They already have 2 stud receivers. They have a wide receiver entering year 2 who showed he could be a productive wide receiver in year 1. Plus, this rookie wide receiver really needs to play out of the slot at the next level, and they have one of the best slot receivers in the entire NFL. Now, sure, this team will throw the ball a lot. They don't have a great defense, and I don't mind the quarterback here at all, but the problem is, what is the path for volume for this wide receiver? This is not a wide receiver who can make plays happen after the catch and do it all by himself. He needs the volume, and I just don't see how he's going to get the volume in the situation he's in right now. And if he struggles out of the gate or has problems acclimating, he could literally be a guy who plays very little snaps and isn't even fantasy relevant in 2025. Yet he's going ahead of another rookie wide receiver who also needs to play in the slot in the NFL and also is competing with 2 good wide receivers. But the big difference here is this rookie clearly has the slot role in this offense because the 2 wide receivers he's competing against are both outside wide receivers. Not to mention, he's now playing with one of the best offensive minds in the entire NFL with a quarterback, a young quarterback who could still develop and turn into one of the best quarterbacks in the entire game. And unlike wide receiver A, this is a guy who doesn't need a ton of volume. This is one of the best yard after catch wide receivers in this entire class, and he landed into an offense that is going to give him plenty of opportunities to rack up yards after the catch and hit those big home runs. Now, sure, there is a chance that both Emeka Egbuka and Luther Burden are disappointments in year 1 as rookies. They're both in crowded wide receiver rooms. There may not be enough target volume here for either of them, but I would rather take a chance on Luther Burden, who again doesn't need a ton of volume, at any time can take any play and turn it into a house call, and yet he gets drafted after Egbuka in fantasy drafts. I don't understand why Egbuka is even being drafted in fantasy drafts. Outside of injury, I don't see a path for Egbuka being relevant in 2025. So now you know which wide receivers to avoid and which ones to draft, but you need to know way more than that if you're going to win your 2025 Fantasy Football League. So don't worry, got you covered. Our 2025 playlist, chock full of tons of valuable information, can be found right here.